we have a lot to get through here. We've got Jason from California, he, him. Jason wants to talk about the implications that time has on reality and touch on the time-space continuum. Now, I'm not a physicist. Dave, I think your background's in chemistry, if I recall correctly?
Yeah, chemistry.
Yep. So
I probably won't have too much to say here, but I can try.
We may be limited to some degree, but Jason, why don't you explain what your either question is or what your claim is?
Hi. How are you doing?
Hi there. Doing well.
How's it going?
All right. Pretty good, brother. Yes. So basically, I wanted to bring up time, as you said. Time being in symbiosis with matter and space, of course, being the time-space continuum. So basically, all three of those components are defined by the other, depend on the others, on the other two, each one. So you can't have matter without time. Can't have space without, can't have matter without a place or a time to put it. Basically.
Yeah.
So,
no, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Right. So basically, that would imply that all three of those components have to exist at once, and since you cannot have an eternal amount of past moments, which you'll run into an infinite regression paradox.
Mm-hmm.
That means that all of time, space, and matter had to come to being at one point in time, the beginning of time, space, and matter. Could we agree, or do you have any?
Let's swap out matter for energy. Let's say space, time, and energy all arose at once.
Yes.
Probably.
Yes.
Although I will say that you inserted a premise there that some people may not agree with, which is either there can't be or there was not an infinite regression at the beginning of whatever this is, right? You just asserted that, and I'm not sure that that's been necessarily established. Some people believe that the universe has been here forever. Religious people believe that God existed forever. So I think there's a lot of people out there who would disagree with that premise. So what evidence do you have that we didn't see an infinity up until, or back until, I guess we should say, any particular point you want to cause as creation, or that there was a moment of creation to begin with?
Well, it is pretty widely accepted that you cannot have an eternal amount of past moments because we exist in the present. And with an eternal amount of
Is it
past
widely
moments,
accepted? I was asking for evidence, not claims that something's popular. So,
no.
What are we talking about here? Let's do this. Let's accept that premise.
I agree with the premise, though, so I'd be interested.
Let's just accept the premise tentatively. I just wanted to point out for our audience that we can't steamroll past these without at least questioning them. So let's say, at least are we talking about the Big Bang, or is there a multiverse and we're talking the time passing through there? Because the local presentation of what we consider space-time, we can only go back to some Planck time after the Big Bang to really be able to even measure or know anything. So let's just say we agree with you with respect to the Big Bang and the local presentation of this universe. So what?
Yeah,
I guess is where do we go from there?
You bring up Planck time, which also proves that there is you get to a certain amount of fraction down time that it can't be any smaller. That's Planck theory also proves that. But so there's many different facets to the theory, but to me it sounds pretty basic. I'm not trying to be I'm not trying to be insulting or anything, but it seems pretty basic to me that you can't have an eternal amount of past moments and whilst existing in the present. But since you said you'll accept that, therefore, and you said okay, so here's in you do run into that complication where you say God existed forever, but forever implies time. So we exist within time because we are matter within space, but God would not necessarily exist within his own creation, of course, if this is a creation that is subsequent to God's initial act of creating. So God would not be bound by the time he created, essentially.
So what you're saying is that God changed states at some point. He changed the states of things. Before, God existed in a place where he didn't have a universe that we live in. And then after, God existed in a state where he had a universe where we exist. That change of state necessitates time. You can't have change without having time. That's almost the definition of time, right? Entropy running in one direction.
Well,
so
only within our realm.
Okay, so you're creating this, you're just proposing a separation between God and our realm that he magically can affect, but it doesn't change his state of having a realm that he can access after he created it, and not having a realm he could access before he created it. Don't you see the problem with that?
No. Actually, no.
You don't. Do you see a problem with that, Dave? I don't know. Am I talking gibberish?
I mean, I understand the angle. It's a very popular angle to simply say, okay, God exists outside of time. All right, so that seems to absolve the necessity of explaining this infinite regression. To me, it's just nonsensical, right? And I understand the angle that you're bringing up here, right? If you're trying to describe anything that this deity could do, we're ascribing it some kind of interaction with some concept of time. It may not be the timeline in our universe or whatever it is, but to me, saying that something can exist outside of time is precisely as nonsensical as saying something can exist infinitely into the past. It's my philosophy is to reject both of those possibilities.
See, your key word there is something, and you are correct. Something cannot exist outside of time. God is not a thing. God created things.
What evidence do you have that this
God
that is not a thing exists?
God is not a thing. He is spirit, as described in biblical accounts.
Isn't spirit a thing? Isn't an entity a thing? Right? I mean, a thing is just a word that means any conceivable concept or object. I mean,
as we agreed, we agreed to settle on the fact that matter can be. It can be defined as energy. God is not energy. He created energy.
So let's take a step back. Hold on, Jason. Let's take a step back. You're asserting that there is this thing, this being, this energy, this spirit, this something, and you're asserting that this exists somewhere. What evidence do you have that it exists?
We know that consciousness exists because we are conscious.
No. Stop. You have identified this consciousness as this separate thing that created the universe, that is outside of this universe. What evidence do you have that consciousness exists?
Again, he's not a thing. So
I said there's consciousness.
Again, it's pretty simple concept, buddy. It's a pretty simple concept. We exist.
So is Puff the Magic Dragon. It doesn't make it real. Just because something's simple doesn't mean that it's real. So please answer our question. What evidence do you have that there is this existence that you are calling God outside of space and time that created our universe?
Well, I already posited that time had a beginning, and matter is in some symbiosis with time. So things that, like what you refer to as things, can't exist without time, without being bound by time.
Okay, let me rephrase this because I don't think you're understanding my question. You are creating a new, let's call it a new state of being, right? You're saying, oh, God is not time, space, energy. He's none of that. He's something else, and he exists outside of our universe. What evidence do you have that state of being exists?
Do you believe consciousness is...
Will you please answer a question that we're asking?
Yeah, you're being kind of...
What evidence do you have? What evidence do you have?
He's getting a little testy.
Yeah, what evidence do you have, Jason, of this, for want of a better word, because you started using it, God? What evidence do you have?
Sorry, buddy. I'm literally trying to get it out to you, and you keep asking me.
I understand that. I'm going to do a little public service announcement. And Dave, you may run into this in your area as well. When somebody asks you a question of what evidence do you have, they're asking for evidence. I'm sure, Dave, in your career, you've dealt with evidence. You've dealt with data. What isn't evidence is arguments. What isn't evidence is just so stories. What isn't evidence is explanations. I'm asking for evidence. If I'm going to court, I'm an attorney. If I go to court and I tried to present what you're presenting, I would be laughed out of the courthouse because I'm not answering the judge's question. Hey, counselor, when are you going to present evidence? Well, you see, Your Honor, that's not how it works. You should be able to immediately answer the question. So, Dave, what sort of evidence would you expect somebody to be able to present to prove that something exists?
I mean, it's hard to even fathom. I mean, we know certainly that he does not have any, and that's fine because this isn't really a scientific argument. You know what I mean? This is philosophical conjecture, and it's philosophical conjecture that he's welcome to engage in. This doesn't offend me at all, right? This is the least offensive version of engaging in belief in a deity that there is, right? This is the most basal level. Anyone who believes in a deity is in agreement with this, and he's not adding any of these other layers that are offensive to me. It seems like he thinks he has evidence, even though he knows he cannot provide any. But again, that's fine, right? You can go ahead and believe in this God, and we don't because there's no evidence, and that's okay. You can believe in things without evidence because that's your personal spirituality, and that's just how you want to view reality. It's fine, but it never ends up going anywhere as a rational discussion because there's just not really anything to latch onto, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, Jason, hearing all of that, if you want to convince people of the truth of your claims, you're going to need to give us evidence and, to add what Dave said, some significance. So let's start again. What evidence do you have that there is a consciousness outside of our local presentation of the universe that started with the Big Bang, let's say, that caused the Big Bang? What evidence do you have? What measurements have you taken? What data do you have? What observations do you have?
Okay, so our consciousness would be the evidence that I'm speaking of. Because
what is our consciousness?
Right, exactly.
Do you know?
Because it's not material.
What is our consciousness? Exactly. No, I'm asking you, what is our consciousness? Because if you know, I think you're going to win the Nobel Prize, because I don't think any scientist on the planet would say they know what a consciousness is. At best, it's some sort of emergent property of the activities in our brain, some electrochemical activity. But you keep asserting these things without actually giving us any measurements. So what is consciousness?
Consciousness is immaterial existence.
Does it exist outside the presence of a brain? Have we ever seen consciousness exist outside the presence of a brain, a physical brain?
That's begging an impossibility. You can't.
No, it's not begging. I'm asking you a question. I'm just asking you a question. Have we ever witnessed evidence of a consciousness absent a brain?
I have not seen it with my eyes, no.
Okay, so we have no basis of comparison here. It's
immaterial. That's the very definition, but it is real because we are conscious. We have electric, means of having, synapses firing off too, because since we are within time.
What are synapses and electricity? Are those real?
Yes, absolutely. Electricity is absolutely real.
You're measuring real things.
But consciousness cannot be described as electricity, or that's.
No, I didn't. What did we describe consciousness as?
Consciousness. Again, you're asking for it's an impossibility for me to envelop something that I am positing that is beyond the time-space continuum. It is.
If consciousness is immaterial, then why does it only manifest in brains?
Well, only to us because we are in the time-space continuum. I can't see outside of the time-space continuum with my eyes, with my physical eyes.
Okay, so here we are. We've come to the point, and I think this is a great place to wrap up. Your argument so far has been to assert that there's a consciousness outside of our ability to access, outside the universe. Let's call it for shorthand. We then say, okay, hold on a second. We then say, oh, wait a second. We've never seen consciousness exist outside of the presence of some physical substrate, to be a Jordan Peterson word fan for a second. Every time we see consciousness, we see a physical medium, a brain. And we even have evidence that if you alter the brain, you alter consciousness. We've got drugs that do it. We've got people that have had railroad spikes go through their head and they've changed their personality from pleasant and wonderful to horrible and mean. We know that your personality, your consciousness, your whole mental being changes when the physical thing changes. That's all we have evidence for. That's evidence. We've studied that. You come along and assert there is a consciousness outside of our universe, right? And so when you use the word consciousness, that's what we think of. And we ask you what evidence you have. And we've been on the call for 15 minutes and you haven't given us any. So one more time, what evidence do you have? Evidence, measurements, anything that there is or could be a consciousness outside of our universe?
So basically what you're asking for is for me to be able to prove something outside of the physical from within the physical. All I can do is extrapolate algebraically with what I have. And of course, that's the only possibility.
I'd love to see some of that algebra.
Yeah. Dave, I think you need to do a new video, algebra of metaphysics.
It's philosophical algebra. It's basically if x plus 2 equals 4, I can figure out what x is, not really seeing exactly what it is, but it's an extrapolation.
So not only are you asserting that consciousness exists out of our current universe, you're saying that logic and algebra also must hold across that barrier.
No. Of course, logic, the laws of logic, numerology is a part of our realm.
Numerology? Okay.
Yeah.
We're throwing around a lot of words that we're not fully understanding.
Physics, mathematics, it's all part of this creation.
Okay. I really appreciate your call, Jason. Next time you call, be prepared to answer the questions rather than ramble.
Let me just wrap this up if I can.
Please do.
If I can interject. So, look, man, you're very clear. I mean, this is just a textbook out of the gaps argument, and that's okay. You've honed in on the two remaining gaps. We do not fully understand the origin of the universe, and we do not fully understand consciousness. You're correct. And it is okay. It is absolutely okay for you to believe as part of your personal spirituality that there's a God that created the universe. That's totally fine. But I think what we're both trying to drive home for you is that you absolutely do not have any evidence for this deity, right? And you're engaging in a lot of mental gymnastics to try to substantiate it in a logical, rational way. It's not. It's a faith that you hold, and that is fine. It is absolutely fine that you believe in that God. I could entertain it. Ultimately, I don't believe it. But it's simply because I don't have any evidence for it. It doesn't mean that I'm right. It doesn't mean that I know for sure that there's no God. That's it.
Right. You know, and the evidence that we do have actually demands it. That's what I'm saying. I can't encompass this idea.
We keep asking you to provide evidence. You don't have any, right? That's the point. That's what I'm trying to tell you right now. You don't have evidence. If you had evidence, it would be a rational position. It's not. It's a faith-based position that you hold because of your faith, and that's totally fine. Just accept that.
I think we're done. Thank you very much, Jason. I appreciate it. I think that was a perfect way to wrap it up. I do want to have a tiny discussion here because I think there's something very interesting to talk about here, and that is to what extent does having these mild religious beliefs cause problems for society, right? So I had a friend once, still a friend, who she was in the Mormon church, and we got into a philosophical, very polite conversation. And when it got down to sort of these truth claims, she said, "What does it matter if I have these beliefs that aren't true?" She just out and out she said, well, yeah, it may not be true. I just believe it. It was very reminiscent of the Book of Mormon, musical that has a song that says, I believe. A Mormon just believes, no matter how crazy it is. So there's two problems, I think. One is you can waste a lot of time on something you have no evidence for, chasing it down or whatever, which can be scientific, but it also can be just a huge waste of time. And two, it can give cover to the more extremists in our society that would say, look, the guy that just called is a Christian. He was, I'm assuming that he started talking about biblical things and all of that sort of stuff. So let's just say he was a Christian, or somebody like that is a Christian. He's a Christian and I'm a Christian. We're the same. Let's all vote together. Meanwhile, we've got Christians that have taken over Idaho and have passed laws because they are Christian. Nobody wants to vote against them, that let you kill your kid by neglecting them, giving them medical neglect, as long as you do it because you're praying over them. So isn't there a gateway faith?
It's a spectrum. I mean, if I believe that there's an invisible dragon in the corner over there, and that's the end of the story, all right, that's not really hurting anybody. If I say that the dragon is telling me to go get a gun and shoot all my neighbors, then we got a problem here, right? I think that absolutely raw, decontextualized theism is not a problem. At all. Right. It's when you get into specifics of what that God wants and what we should do about it, that's when you get into trouble.
Right. I agree totally. And nothing Jason says we didn't get to the point of saying, I know what the God wants. But that is, to me, the scariest moment.
He's just trying to intellectualize his faith. And I see it all the time. And it's something that you can do in your brain. And it's a fun thought exercise. Ultimately, I think does not really bear much fruit. And we saw pretty easily that he doesn't have any rational basis to what he's saying. It's just he's trying to pretend that he has a rational basis for his faith. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. The moment somebody goes from, I'm a deist, I think there's a God that set the universe running like a clock and just is hands off, to, oh no, there's a God that interferes and I know what it wants. Even if they say, I know what it wants, and it wants it all to love each other. Yeah. The fact that you think you have access to this information is the scary part, because a person who thinks that can be convinced that
can be manipulated typically. Can be manipulative. Also, the idea that it's a him, right? What the hell would it be? Right. Anybody who's envisioning, right, the whole created in God's image, right? There's a God, we have this shape because we're walking around on a planet, right? Before there was anything, there's just some dude with arms and legs and a beard and a dick that existed before planets.
Right.
And water and air, and it just makes no sense at all. It's just nothing.